11 December. What if everyone lied to me? What if this whole expedition was a trick, a deception designed only to make me give up Marta? Perhaps this idea is just a delusion arising out of humiliation, loneliness, and several sleepless nights. But it could be the truth. Gregorio, wanting to make me give up Marta once and for all, could have told Domenico to take me with him and do whatever was necessary to make me never want to see her again. Didn't someone tell me one day in Smyrna that Sayyaf was mixed up with smuggling? Smuggling mastic? So it's likely that Domenico knew him, though he pretended he was seeing him for the first time. That may have been why they made me stay behind a partition, so that I couldn't see their nods and winks and unmask their conspiracy. And probably Marta knew Demetrios and Yanis too. She'd have seen them before in her husband's house, so she'd have felt obliged to say what she did. But when we were alone together in the hold when she was lying down, why didn't she take the opportunity to speak to me in secret? I must be deluding myself. Why should all those people have been merely acting a part, just to deceive me and make me give up that woman? Hadn't they anything better to do with their lives than risk being hanged or impaled in order to dabble in my amorous intrigues? My reason is out of joint as my poor father's shoulder was once. It needs good shock to reset. 13 December. For 12 days as I wandered about on the boat as if I were invisible. Everyone had orders to avoid me. If a sailor threw me a word from time to time, it was half-heartedly and after making sure no one else was looking. I took my meals alone and surreptitiously, as if I had the plague. But today people started talking to me again. Domenico came up to me and threw his arms round me as if he was just welcoming me on board. That was the signal for all the rest to mix with me again. I could have sulked, refused the offered hand, let the braggart blood of the Ambriaci speak. But no. The truth is, I am relieved to be back in favor. I found it hard to bear being an outcast. I am not one of those people who revel in adversity. I like to be liked, loved. 14 December. According to Domenico, I should thank the Almighty for arranging things his way rather than mine. These words from a smuggler turned spiritual advisor have made me think, weigh things up, make comparisons, and in the end I don't think he's altogether wrong. Suppose she said that you'd hoped she'd say. That her husband ill-treated her, that she'd lost her child because of him, and she'd like to leave him. In that case, I imagine you'd have kept her and taken her back to your own country. Of course. What about the husband? To hell with him! Yes, but would you have let him go home so that one day he might come and knock at your door and ask for his wife back? And what would you have told her family? That he was dead? Do you think I never thought of all that? Oh no, I'm sure you did, but I'd like you to tell me how you propose to solve those problems. We were both silent for a while. I don't want to torture you, Balthasar. I am your friend, and I've done for you what your own father wouldn't have done. So I'm going to say to you what you yourself don't like to say to me. You should have killed that swine of a husband. No, don't make a face and look shocked. I know you thought of it, and so did I, because if the woman had decided to leave him, neither you nor I would have wanted him to remain alive to come back and haunt us. I'd always have been thinking every time I went to Chios that there was someone there waiting to be revenged on me. And you too would have preferred to know he was dead. Probably. But you could have killed him? But could you have killed him? I thought of it, I admitted, but didn't go any further. Thinking of it isn't enough. Wishing for it still less. Wishing someone else was dead, that's something that can happen every day. A servant who steals, a difficult customer, a troublesome neighbor, even your own father. But in this case, wishing wouldn't have been enough. Would you have been capable of, say, picking up a knife, going up to your rival and sticking it in his heart, or binding him hand and foot and throwing him overboard? You thought of it, and I thought of it for you. I wonder what would be the ideal solution for you, and I found it. Killing him, throwing him overboard wouldn't have been enough. You didn't only need to know he was dead, you also needed your neighbors to see he was dead. We'd, we'd have had to head in the direction of Giblet, taking him with us still alive. When we were a few cables' length from nearby coast, we'd have tied his feet together, thrown him overboard, towed him along for an hour, say, then hauled him up again, drowned. Then we'd have untied his feet and laid him on a stretcher, and you and the woman would have put on long faces and let my man take you and the corpse ashore. You'd have told everyone he'd fallen overboard and drowned that day, and I'd have confirmed it. Then you'd have buried him, and a year later you'd have married his widow. That's how I would have managed it. I have already killed a dozen of men, and none of them has come back to haunt me in my dreams. But you, tell me, could you have done it? I admitted that I certainly have thanked God if our expedition had ended in the way he'd just imagined, but that I couldn't have committed a crime like that. Then be glad she didn't say what you hoped she'd say. 15 December. I keep thinking about what Domenico said. If he'd been me, I have no doubt he'd have acted exactly as he described, but I am a born merchant, and I have a soul of a merchant, not of a pirate or a warrior, nor that of a brigand either. Perhaps that's why Marta chose the other instead of me. He, like Domenico, wouldn't have hesitated to kill to get what he wanted. Neither of them has any scruples about it, but would either of them ever have gone out of their way for the love of a woman? I haven't forgotten yet. I don't know if I ever shall. Yes, one day I shall, and her betrayal will help. Even so, I can't help still having a doubt. Did she really betray me, or did she say what she did to save her child? There I go talking about the child again, though everyone tells me it doesn't exist and never did. But what if they are all lying to me? She to protect her child and the others too. No, that's enough. I must stop deluding myself. Even if I'll never know the whole truth, I must turn my back on my past and look ahead. Ahead. Anyhow, this year is nearly over. 17 December. I looked at the sky last night, and it seems to me that there really are fewer and fewer stars. They're going out one after the other, while on earth the cities burn. The world began in paradise and is going to end in hell. Why did I come in so late? 19 December. We've just passed through the Straits of Messina, avoiding the whirlpool they call Charybdis. Domenico named his boat after it to try to ward off its dangers, but still he takes care never to ignore it. Now we're going to sail up the coast of Italy to Genoa. The Calabrian promises me a new life awaits me there. But what's the point in my starting a new life if the world is about to end? I always thought I'd spend the last days of the year of the beast in Giblet, so that all my people would be huddled together in the same house, comforted by familiar voices, if what must happen did happen. I was so sure I'd go back there. I hardly ever mentioned it. I just wondered about the dates and the routes. Should I go straight there in April instead of following the 100th name to London? Should I go through Chios or Smyrna on the way back? Even Gregorio, when he made me promise to go back to Genoa, realized I couldn't do so until I'd settled my affairs in Giblet. Yes, here I am on the way to Genoa. I'll be there for Christmas, and that's where I'll be when the year 1666 comes to an end. 20 December. The truth is, I have been hiding the truth from myself all the time, even in this journal, which ought to have been my confessor. The truth is, I knew that once I was in Genoa again, I'd never go back to Giblet. I murmured it to myself sometimes without ever daring to write it down, as if such a monstrous thought could never be put on paper. For my beloved sister is in Giblet, and my business, as well as my parents' grave and the house where I was born and my grandfather's father before me, but I am as much of a stranger there as a Jew. While Genoa, where I'd never lived before, has recognized me, embraced me, taken me to its bosom like the prodigal son. I walked ahead, held high along its narrow streets, say my Italian name aloud, smile at the women, and I am not afraid of the Janissaries. One of the Embriachi's ancestors may have been accused of drinking too much, but they have a tower named after them too. Every family ought to have a tower named after them somewhere. This morning I wrote what I thought I ought to write. I could just as easily have written the opposite. I boast about being at home in Genoa and only in Genoa, when in fact I'll always, till the end of my days, be Gregorio's guest here, and in his death I'm going to leave my own roof to live under his, abandon my own business to work for him. Shall I be able to take pride in living like that, depending on him and his generosity when I think of him as I do? His enthusiasm irritates me, his devotion makes me laugh, and I've already had to make my escape because I'd had enough of his nudges and winkes of his wife's face. I am going to be given his daughter's hand as if it were homage from a vessel, a kind of droit du seigneur, because I bear the name of the Embriachi and he bears only his own. He'll have worked all his life just for me, built up his business, built his ships, accumulated his wealth, and founded his family just for my benefit. He'll have planted, watered, pruned, tended the tree, and I'll just have come along and picked the fruit, and I have the audacity to take pride in my name and strut around Genoa after abandoning what I built myself and what my ancestors built up for me. I shall end this year in Genoa, but if there are any other years to come, I don't know yet where I'll spend them. 22 December 1666. We sheltered from the swell in an almost deserted inlet north of Naples on the alert for wreckers. It seems some people aboard saw a big fire on the coast on the outskirts of Naples, but I was in bed and didn't see anything. I am suffering from seasickness again and a general unease at the approaching end of the year. In 10 days' time the world will either be definitely over the worst or have sunk beyond recall. 23 December 1666. Neither Marta nor Giacominetta. When I woke up this morning, I was thinking of Bess and her red hair, how she smells of violets and beer, how she looks at you like a mother who can't do enough for you. I don't miss London, but I can't think without sadness of its terrible fate. And though I hated its streets and its crowds, I made a tribe of strange friends there, all revolving around Bess. What has become of them? What has become of their dilapidated alehouse with its wooden stairs and its attics? What has become of the Tower of London and St. Paul's Cathedral and all those bookshops and their heaps of books? Ashes, dust and ashes, like the faithful journal I used to keep every day, like all the other books except Mazandarani's. His book spreads desolation all around, but always emerges unscathed itself. Wherever it's been, there have been nothing but fires and shipwrecks. A fire in Constantinople, a fire in London, and Marmontel shipwrecked. And this ship now, which looks as if it might capsize at any moment. Woe to whoever approaches the hidden name. His eyes are always dimmed or dazzled, never lit. Now, when I pray, I feel like saying, Lord, never be too far away from me, but don't be too close to me either. Let me admire the stars on the hem of thy robe, but do not show me thy face. Let me hear the rippling of thy rivers, the sounds of thy wind blowing through the trees, and the laughter of thy children. But Lord, Lord, let me not hear thy voice. 24 December 1666. Domenico promised we'd be in Genoa for Christmas, but we won't. If the sea were calm, we might get there tomorrow evening, but the libeccio that's blowing from the southwest is getting stronger and we'll have to take shelter on the coast again. Libeccio. I'd forgotten the word. I used to hear it often in my childhood when my father and grandfather would talk of it with a mixture of nostalgia and fear. They always contrasted it with the Sicroco and said, if I remember rightly, that Genoa has provided itself with defenses against one, but not against the other. They blamed the present ruling families who spend fortunes on palaces for themselves, but are like misers when it comes to providing for the common good. Domenico told me that until 20 years ago, ships wouldn't spend the winter in Genoa because the libeccio caused such terrible havoc there. Every year, between 20 and 40 boats, once more than 100 of all shapes and sizes, would be sunk. November and December were the worst months, but more recently a new jetty has been built, sheltering the harbor from the west. We shan't have anything to fear there. The dock's as smooth as a lake now, but we've got to get there first. My ancestors. 25 December 1666. This morning we tried to get out to the open sea, then we had to fall back on the coast again. The libeccio was blowing harder and harder, and Domenico knew he wouldn't get far, but he wanted us to be able to shelter in the cove behind the Portovenere Peninsula towards Lerici. I am tired of being at sea and ill all the time. I'd have been glad to travel the rest of the way to Genoa by road. It's only a day's journey overland from here. But after all the captain and his crew have done for me, I'd be ashamed to abandon them like that. It is only right that I should share their fate as they shared mine, even if I have to heave my heart up. December 26th. Domenico said to a grumpy old sailor who told him off for breaking his promise, better be late in Genoa than early in hell. We all laughed except the old boy, except he's too close. I expect he's too close to his own end to see the funny side. Monday, 27 December 1666. Genoa at last. Gregorio was waiting for me in the harbor. He'd posted a man near the lighthouse to let him know as soon as our boat hove in sight. Seeing him waving excitedly in the distance, I remembered my first arrival in the city of my ancestors 9 months ago. I was on the same boat, coming from the same island, commanded by the same captain. But it was spring then, and the port was full of ships being loaded and unloaded, customs men, travelers, clerks, and ordinary onlookers. Today there was only us. No other boat was arriving or departing. No one was there to say hail or farewell to a traveler. There were no idle bystanders. No one. Not even Melchione Baldi. I looked for him in vain. Nothing but empty boats at their moorings and quays that were practically empty too. In this wilderness of stone and water, swept by a cold wind, one man stood ruddy and smiling, generous but intransigent. Master Mangiavaca came to take delivery of 800 liters of mastic and a prodigal son in law. I still make fun of him, but I've given up trying to resist him, and I bless rather than curse him. Giacominetta blushed when she saw me enter the house with her father. She'd obviously been told already that I was coming back to Genoa, that I was asking for her hand, and that my request would be granted. As for my future mother in law, she was unwell because of the cold, and I was informed has had to keep up her bed for the last couple of days. I suppose it might be true. There are three things I dislike about Giacominetta: her first name, her mother, and the fact that in some ways she's rather like Elvira, my first wife and the sorrow of my life. But Gregorio's poor daughter can't be held responsible for any of these defects. 28th December. My host came to see me in my room very early this morning. He's never done that before. He said he'd rather no one else knew of our conversation, but it seems to me that what he really wanted was to make a solemn occasion of it. He'd come for me to pay my verbal debt to him. He'll never ask me to repay the money I owe him. I expected it, of course, but perhaps not so soon, nor in quite this manner. We've made promises to each other, he began. I haven't forgotten, I said. Nor have I, but I don't want you to feel bound, out of obligation to me or even out of friendship, to do something you don't want to do. For that reason, I free you from your oath until the end of today. I've told them in the kitchens that you are tired after your journey and will stay in your room until the evening. Your meals and anything else you need will be brought up to you. Take a day off for the rest and meditation. When I come back, you'll give me your answer. Whatever it is, I'll accept it. He wiped away a tear and left without waiting for me to reply. As soon as he'd shut the door behind him, I sat down at my table to write these lines in the hope that it would help me to think. To think. How presumptuous! When you are thrown into the water, you flounder, you swim, you float, or you sink. You don't think. Near to me on the table is the 100th name. Should I regard it as a privilege to have it in my possession as the fateful year is ending? Are these really the world's last few days, the final 3 or 4 days before the last judgment? Is the universe going to burst into flame and then go out? Will the walls of this house crumple up like the sheet of paper in the hand of a giant? Will the ground on which Genoa stands suddenly open up under our feet amid shouts and screams as in some vast ultimate earthquake? And when the moment comes, shall I be able to pick up the book, open it at the right page, and suddenly see before me in shining letters the supreme name that I have never been able to read? To tell the truth, I am not sure of anything. I imagine all these things and read some of them, but don't believe in any. I've spent a whole year running after a book I no longer want. I have dreamed of a woman who has preferred a brigand to me. I've filled hundreds of pages and there's nothing left of them. And yet I am not unhappy. I am in Genoa, in the warm. I am wanted and perhaps even loved a little. I look at the world and at my own life as if I were a stranger. I wish for nothing except perhaps that time would stop on the 28th of December, 1666. I waited for Gregorio, but it was his daughter who came just now. The door opened and Giacominetta came in, bringing me a tray of coffee and sweetmeats. She obviously meant to use it as an excuse for us to talk to one another. Not this time about garden trees or the names of plants and flowers, but about what's in store for us, because she's impatient, and how can I blame her? My own questions about our future marriage take up a quarter of my thoughts. She's only just 14, and her questions about the matter most occupy absolutely all her time, but I pretend not to notice. Tell me, Giacominetta, did you know your father and I have talked a lot about you and your future? She blushed and said nothing, though she didn't pretend to be surprised. We've mentioned betrothal and marriage. She was still silent. Did you know I'd been married before and I am a widower? She didn't know, and yet I told her, and yet I told her father. I was 19. My family arranged for me to marry the daughter of a merchant living in Cyprus. What was her name? Elvira. What did she die of? Sorrow. She'd wanted to marry a young man she knew, a Greek. She didn't really want to have anything to do with me, but they didn't tell me. If I'd known, I might have refused to go through with it, but she was young and I was young, and we did as our fathers told us. But she could never be happy, and she didn't make me happy either. I'm telling you all this because I don't want the same thing to happen with us. I want you to tell me what you want. I don't want you to be forced to do anything you don't want to do. You only need to tell me, and I'll pretend the difficulty is on my side. Giacominetta blushed again, turned her face away, and said, If you and I get married, I won't be unhappy. Then she ran out of the room. The door had been wide open all the time. In the afternoon, while I am still waiting for Gregorio to come back for my answer, I look out of the window and see his daughter walking in the garden. She goes up the statue of Bacchus that I gave to Gregorio and leans against the shoulders of the recumbent god. When her father comes back, I shall ask him for her hand as I promised. If the world lasts out until my wedding day, I can only be glad, and if it doesn't, if it dies and Genoa dies and we all die, I'll have paid my debt and I'll be easier in my mind as I go, and so will Gregorio. But I don't want the world to end, and I don't really think it's going to. Did I ever? Perhaps. I can't remember. December 29. While I was away, the letter I was expecting, the one from Pleasance, arrived in Genoa. It's dated Sunday, 12 December, but Gregorio didn't receive it until last week and didn't give it to me until this morning. He claimed he'd forgotten about it. I don't believe him. I know perfectly well why he didn't give it to me before. He wanted to be sure no news from Giblet would hold up my decision. But he was being too careful. There's nothing in the letter that could affect my relationship with his daughter or with him, but how was he to know? My sister says both her sons came home safe and sound, but she has no news of Hatim and his family is very worried. I try to reassure them, but I don't really know what to say, she writes. She begs me to let her know if I have any news. I reproach myself for not asking Marta about it when I saw her. I meant to, but I was so shaken by the way things turned out I didn't think of it. I regret it now, but what good does that do me? And what good does it do poor Hatim? I am particularly affected by this piece of news because I didn't expect it. I didn't have much confidence in my nephews. One was motivated by the desires and the other by his crazy ideas, and they both struck me as weak and vulnerable. I had been afraid they might refuse to go back to Giblet or to get lost on the way. But I was used to emerging unscathed from difficult situations with the aid of my clerk, and I hoped he'd manage to get to Smyrna to take charge of Habib and Boumé before they left. My sister also tells me that a parcel arrived from Constantinople delivered by a pilgrim on his way to the Holy Land. It contains the things I had to leave behind at Barinelli's. Pleasance mentions some of them, but she doesn't say anything about my first notebook. Perhaps they didn't find it. But it may be that my sister didn't mention it because she doesn't know how important it is to me. She doesn't say anything about Martha either. It's true that in my letter to Pleasance I merely said she'd joined us for part of my journey. I expect her sons have put her in the picture about our idol, but she chose to say nothing about it. That doesn't surprise me. 30 December. I went to thank Brother Egidio for bringing Pleasant's letter. He spoke as if it were understood that I was going to marry Giacominetta, praising her piety and that of her mother and sisters. When it came to Gregorio, he lauded only his good nature and generosity. I didn't argue. The die is cast, the Rubicon crossed, and there's no point now in fussing about the details. I didn't really choose to get mixed up in all this, but does one ever really have any choice? It's better to go along with the way Providence than spend your whole life consumed with regret and resentment. Surrendering to fate is nothing to be ashamed of. It was an unequal contest, so honor is satisfied. In any case, you always lose the last battle. In the course of our conversation, which lasted for over 2 hours, Brother Egidio told me that according to travelers recently arrived from London, the fire was eventually put out. It's said to have destroyed most of the city, but not many people were killed. If it had wished it, the Almighty could have wiped out that country of infidels. But he just gave them a warning so that they might renounce their errors and return to the merciful fold of Mother Church. In Brother Egidio's opinion, it was the secret devotion of King Charles and Queen Catherine that persuaded the Lord to be lenient this time. But one day, the perfidy of the English themselves will exhaust God's infinite patience. A crowd of different thoughts crossed my mind as he spoke. While I was hiding up in the roof of the alehouse, it was rumored that it was because of the king that God had punished London, because of his secret devotion to the Antichrist in Rome, and because of his marital infidelities. Was God too hard on the English, or not hard enough? We ascribe to him such sentiments as vexation, anger, impatience, and satisfaction, but what do we know of his real feelings? If I were he and presided over the whole universe for ever and ever, master of today and tomorrow, master of birth, life, and death, I don't think I'd ever feel either impatient or satisfied. What is impatience to him who disposes of eternity? What is satisfaction to him who possesses everything? I can't imagine him being angry or outraged or shocked or vowing to punish those who turn away from the Pope or stray from the marriage bed. If I were God, I'd have saved London for Bess's sake. After seeing her rush about and worry and risk her life to save a Genoese, a passing stranger, I'd have stroked her tousled hair with a little breeze, sponged the sweat from her face, removed the debris that barred her way, scattered the raging mob, and put out the flames encircling her house. I'd have let her go up to her room and lie down and fall asleep with an untroubled brow. And is it possible that I, Balthasar, miserable sinner that I am, could be kinder than he? That my merchant's heart could be more generous than his and more inclined to mercy? When I look over what I've just written, carried away by my pen, I can't help feeling rather scared. But I shouldn't be. A God who deserves my prostrating myself before him can't be petty or easily offended. He must be above all. He must be greater. He is greater, as the Muslims say. So, whether tomorrow is the last day before the end of the world or just the last day of the present year, I mean to stick to my embryacal uppishness and not take anything back. 31 December 1666. This morning, all over the world, lots of people must be thinking today will be the last day of the last year. But here in the streets of Genoa, I haven't noticed any trepidation or any special religious fervor. But Genoa has never prayed for anything but its own prosperity and the safe return of its ships, and never had more religion than is reasonable. God bless it. Gregorio had decided to give a party this afternoon to thank heaven for restoring his wife to health. She got up yesterday and really does seem to be well again, but I have a feeling my host is already celebrating something else, a sort of disguised betrothal, disguised like the writing in this journal. Dame Orietina may be quite well again, but whenever she sees me, she seems to get a pain in her face. I still don't know if she looks at me like that because she doesn't want me as a son-in-law, or because she thinks I ought to have solicited her daughter's hand humbly instead of just accepting it with my nose in the air as something due to the name I bear. Gregorio had engaged a viol player and singer from Cremona to entertain the guests at the party. He played the most delightful tunes by various composers, including, if my memory serves, Monteverdi, Luigi, Rossi, Jacob, Berri, and someone called Mazzocchi or Mazzoli, Marazzoli, whose nephew is supposed to have married one of Gregorio's nieces. I didn't want to spoil my host's pleasure by telling him that the music, even the gayest pieces, made me feel sad. That was because the only other time I'd heard anyone playing the viol was soon after my first marriage, when my family and I went to Cyprus to visit Alvaida's parents. I was already very unhappy, and listening to music that was at all affecting only made me feel worse. But today, when the man from Cremona began to play and the large room was filled with his music, I immediately found myself drifting into a gentle daydream where there was no room for Elvira or Orientina. The only women I thought of were those I've loved, those who held me in their arms when I was a child, my mother, and the black-robed women in Giblet, and those I have held in my arms as a man. Among the latter, none arouses such tenderness in me as Bess. Of course, I do think of Marta a little, but now she causes me as much sadness as Elvira. The wound is taken a long time to heal, whereas my brief and surreptitious stay in Bess's garden will always remain a foretaste of paradise for me. How glad I am that London wasn't destroyed for me. Happiness will always have the taste of spiced beer and the smell of violets, and even the creak of the wooden stairs that led to my kingdom up at the top of the alehouse. Is it right that I should be thinking of Bess like this in the house of my future father-in-law, who's also my benefactor? But the dreams have nothing to do with houses or properties, promises or gratitude. Later in the evening, when the man from Cremona who had had supper with us had just left with his viol, there was an unexpected storm. It couldn't have been far off midnight. Lightning, long rumblings, gusting rain, and all the time the sky, though cloudy, looked calm. Then came the sound of a thunderbolt with a deafening crack like a splitting boulder. Gregorius' youngest daughter, who was drowsing in his arms, woke up and started to cry. Her father comforted her, saying lightning always seems much nearer than it is, and that this boat must have struck up near the castello or in the docks. But he'd scarcely finished reassuring the child when there was another thunderbolt, this time even nearer. Now the crash was simultaneous with the lightning, and several of us cried out. Before we got over our fright, a strange thing happened. We'd been sitting around the hearth, and suddenly, for no apparent reason, a tongue of flame shot out of the fireplace and started advancing across the floor. We were all sat silent, trembling, terrified, and Orientina, who was sitting close to me, but up till then hadn't looked up or spoken to me, suddenly clutched my arm so tightly that I could feel her nails sinking in. In a whisper so loud that everyone could hear it, she hissed, "It's the day of judgment. They weren't lying to me. It's the day of judgment. May the Lord have pity on us." Then she fell on her knees and took a rosary out of her pocket, signing to us to do the same. Her 3 daughters and the maids who were there started muttering prayers. As for me, I couldn't take my eyes off the tongue of flame, which by now, having reached a sheepskin that happened to be lying there, took hold and set it alight. I was shaking in every limb, I admit it, and in the confusion of the moment it struck me that I ought to rush up and get the 100th name from my room. In a few strides I was on the stairs, but then I heard Gregorio shouting, "Balthasar, where are you going? Come and help me!" He'd stood up, grabbed a large jug of water, and started to pour its contents over the burning sheepskin. The fire died down a bit, but didn't quite go out, so he began to stamp on it, leaping about in a sort of dance that in other circumstances would have made us all laugh till we cried. I ran back and joined in, and we both went on jumping on the tongue of flame every time it revived, as if we were trying to crush a column of scorpions. Meanwhile, some of the others got over their terror, and first a young maidservant, then the gardener, then Giacominetta ran and fetched the various receptacles filled with water, which they proceeded to pour over anything that was still burning or glowing smoke. The upheaval lasted only a few minutes, but it was round midnight, so it seems to me the year of the beast must have ended with that farce. Soon, Dame Orientina, now the only one left kneeling, rose to her feet and declared it was time we all went to bed. As I went up, I collected a candlestick, which I put down on the table in my room so that I could write the above lines. Superstitions die hard. I shall stay up until the sun rises to write down the new date. It's now the 1st of January of the year 1667. The so-called year of the beast has ended, yet the sun is rising over my own city in Genoa, which gave me birth 1,000 years ago, then 40 years ago, and now again today. Ever since dawn, I have been overflowing with happiness. I felt like looking at the sun and talking to it like Francis of Assisi. We ought to rejoice every time it begins to give us light again, but now men are ashamed to talk to it. So, neither it nor the other heavenly bodies have gone out. I couldn't see them last night because the sky was cloudy. Tomorrow or the next night I shall be able to see them, and I shan't need to count them. They are there. The heavens haven't been extinguished. The cities haven't been destroyed. Genoa, London, Moscow, and Naples are all still there. We still have to go on living on earth day after day with all our mortal woes, with plague and fever, with war and shipwreck, with our loves and our wounds. No divine catalysm, no august flood will come to drown our fears and treacheries. It may be that heaven only reflects our own promises. Nothing either better or worse. It may be that heaven lives only in terms of our own promises. The 100th name lies there beside me, and still it sometimes troubles me. I wanted it. I found it. I got it back. But though I opened it, it has remained closed to me. Perhaps I wasn't really worthy of it. Perhaps I was too afraid of finding out what it conceals. But maybe it hadn't anything to hide. I shan't open it again. Tomorrow I shall leave it discreetly on a shelf in some bookshop so that one day, years hence, other hands may take it up and other eyes look avidly into it, eyes which may then be able to read it. In pursuit of this book, I have crossed the world over land and sea. But if I were to sum up my peregrinations as the year 1666 is left behind, I'd say I'd have only gone a roundabout from Giblet to Genoa. It's midday by the bells of the nearby church, and I shall now put down my pen for the last time, shut my notebook, put my writing things away, and open myself and the window wide to the sunshine and sounds of Genoa.